Welcome to the Supply Chain Revolution podcast. This is our Student Voices series where we are talking all about the intersection of supply chain, innovation, and sustainability, highlighting founders and students under the age of 25. I'm so thrilled to introduce founding engineer of Mandel AI, Danitsa, who is going to share all about her origin story, her journey into technology, procurement, supply chain, and also leave you all with an inspiring message. Welcome, Danitsa.
Welcome. It's very nice to be here.
Wonderful. So let's start off. If you can tell folks a little bit about yourself and your origin story. You grew up around manufacturing, you worked in SAP, and now you're at Mandel AI. Tell us a little bit about your journey and your path.
Yes, thank you for the question. My father was actually in manufacturing. He's a mechanical engineer, and he spent most of his life around factories, and I did too around him. So I think I got to hear a very personal side of the story. I got to experience firsthand all the kinds of issues that arise with manufacturing, the frustrations around it, suppliers being late, purchases not happening the way they're intended to. Then I ended up working at SAP actually, and I worked on legacy systems that handled the other side of things. So it was invoices, financial operations, and I got to see how it didn't really reflect the ground floor of how these operations worked and how people worked with them. Didn't really reflect what it needed to reflect. That pretty much what led me to start building something in this space, as I could see how little it actually gave what it was supposed to give. And this is how I actually ended up at Mandel AI, where we're trying to automate supply chain workflows to empower professionals to focus on what actually matters.
Wonderful. And I love that you highlight a lot of the pain points or challenges specifically in procurement and financial workflows, because I'm sure a lot of folks that are listening, it deeply resonates with them. I remember when I was in industry, the three-way match was very hard, very hard. And this is, I think, the practicality grounding in that juxtaposed with a lot of the hype around AI is going to be really, really cool to unpack with you. So you mentioned a little bit about the startup. I want to go back to parts of your background that shape the way that you think about supply chain coordination. So enterprise systems, that experience, engineering, you have a lot of very nuanced inputs into showing up as a founding engineer. What parts about your background do you think best shaped your journey and your readiness to step into this role?
Yes, so I think the intuition I received over time when I encountered so many issues, whether it was my father or afterwards when I worked on systems that also reflected one part of the whole process, I could see all sides of the problem, and I could see how the current tools just totally are not able to capture what is really happening in the moment. All of this context, all this information for procurement specialists still lives in 1,000 places, and it doesn't enable them to really do the job that they signed up for. I mean, they lose so much time in administrative work and in follow-ups, in so much mental overhead, in all that context spread around. And it was a bit of personal inspiration to start working on a product that would actually help professionals work better and actually do the job that they signed up for.
Right. That's so fascinating. And we hear a lot about AI use cases, and I love that you've highlighted specific parts of a procurement professional practitioner's job. What parts do you think are a good use case for AI? And then what parts would you argue or challenge should still be decisively human?
I have very strong opinions on that one, by the way. When you hear procurement, people often think it's like, oh, you order something and then it arrives kind of magically, but that's often not the case. Realistically, professionals communicate with hundreds of suppliers. That communication is spread everywhere. It's overloading them. We actually had a very interesting case with one of our clients recently, where I was standing with her during her workday to see how her workflows looked like. And she had her 2 huge monitors spread apart with like 6 tabs open, and we counted this, an hour and a half in order to draft one RFQ, because she had to compare like 3 tables and then only take some of the materials to send them out. The next day, we implemented a feature that brought that down to 5 minutes. And it
Wow.
was super interesting to see real time, the impact of this kind of work. I believe that procurement is one of the places where automation of human judgment is pretty much impossible. Mostly because you have people who need to work under pressure in a very high stakes situations. It's deals worth often millions, especially in large enterprises. But all of the work that goes around it, all the context, all the information gathering, having half of the information be in 3 different threads, and it was actually insane. We saw deals for like hundreds of thousands of dollars being negotiated over WhatsApp. All of
I
that
believe
can
it.
be simplified. And it can enable people to actually, we can remove all of the work that exhausts professionals, because it's administration. It's not really human judgment. So I think it's amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember what you're describing around the information gathering and also the like hundreds of supplier portals or enterprise portals that people are expected to. These are one-off. They're not one-to-many. We haven't really democratized that. I know that we say we have, but even something as simple as supplier onboarding, it can take a really, really, really long time to qualify suppliers. So super interesting. And then let's talk a little bit about the reaction in markets. And when you look at smaller companies versus larger companies and how they adapt or react to AI, where does trust or resistance show up?
Yes, absolutely. It has been interesting when validating the product between different sizes of companies. We have teams of 3 procurement professionals and we have teams of hundreds of procurement professionals. And for both kinds of structures, there's the same problem with like information, coordination problem. But for smaller teams, it's mostly that a small amount of professionals need to take care of a large amount of context. And then for large enterprises, it's impossible to see the big picture because it's so strewn apart. But both of those structures would benefit from AI in different ways. So one would benefit by unifying the context that is strewn about all of these people. The other would help with, offloading all of this overwhelm, following up suppliers automatically, escalating immediately when there's an issue. All of that can be done and then can be passed over, and then everyone can benefit in different ways.
Yeah, it's fascinating how you describe sort of collapsing the time that it takes to do things. The other thing that you mentioned, which I thought was fascinating, was the context in which decisions are made. How does that context show up in Mandel AI, for example, if you can unpack an anonymized client example?
Yes, of course. I can say that what Mandel does is honestly groundbreaking, mostly because it's the only tool out there that is capable of kind of delivering real impact, mostly because what we do is we take all the information from emails, from inboxes. We connect it all together, and then all of the context, for example, Mandel is capable of connecting context across 20 different threads of information, across different inboxes. There was actually a very interesting case that we flagged recently. That was apparently one of our clients was paying, I think, like a 1% more tax for something that they didn't know they were paying. So they actually gave us a ticket about this. And then we looked into it and we found out that they did not know that the supplier had actually put in very, very fine print that there's this tax. So it's insane to consider that all of that gets lost, mostly because when you have to look at 100 emails every morning, you can't really afford to delve that deep, like changing prices. Also, one thing that we do is we automate like reconciliation, so you can compare quotes, you can get differences in prices. If any price changes occur that are outside of what was communicated and negotiated, we flag that. We're capable of drafting supplier follow-ups so that you never have to worry about missing a supplier again. It's just we connect all of it together.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I want to go back to an opening comment where you talked about some things will always require some level of human supervision. And so, what you've just described, some people who are in procurement or ops who are listening, they might feel fearful that there's a real trust gap. So, when you close your eyes and you envision a better procurement operating model where people spend less time on these sorts of things and then they repurpose that time to make other decisions, how do you convince the unwilling, the people who
Actually,
don't get it?
I completely understand the nerves surrounding AI, but the magic behind it is nothing is sent without your knowledge. We're there to give you all of the context so you don't have to worry about missing anything, but all of the power is in your hands. The best procurement professionals I know build real, long lasting relationships with their suppliers. They're partners, they're not just vendors. So we absolutely respect that. I think AI tools are capable of improving their workflow immensely, but the real power really lays exactly in the human judgment behind it. This is what you are meant to do and what you deserve to be able to do without all the overhead.
So I think I hear definitely data gathering, competitive analysis during the RFQ, RFI, RFP processes, basic follow-ups that don't require a lot of strategic oversight. But the data gathering, it sounds like that's probably the area of opportunity where procurement folks listening should really open their eyes and open their ears to the future of AI and automation in the space and in their daily role. Would that be fair?
I think that would be completely, absolutely fair, especially like when it comes to, say, RFQs or tracking shipments or following up with suppliers who have not replied. That's data that is very spread across a lot of different places. The tools that are currently out there, like ERPs, are supposed to know what's happening, but they only know what already happened. You cannot make them follow you dynamically. We want to bring that dynamic using AI to procurement so that you're capable of seeing an error either before it happens or the second it happens.
Absolutely. And I love that you've highlighted the compression of time and how time can actually enable a lot of trust and a lot of value add that maybe doesn't exist right now. And so being able to pull it all in together in one place is super cool. And Danitsa, any final closing thoughts for folks who are listening, maybe want to get involved or learn more?
My final words in general to supply chain professionals is to not be afraid of AI. They stand at a very unique crossroads. The procurement role in general is at a very unique crossroads between operations, finance, legal. You have to communicate with so many different things. There's so much translation and coordination happening, and they're never going to take away the unique judgment that you bring to the situation because you're the only one capable of doing that. But being spread across so many different places, all of that context, we can provide that for you. AI can provide that for you, and they can make your life easier, and they can give you back the job that you love doing, the job that you signed up for, really.
Wonderful. What a great message to close on. Thank you so much for joining the Student Voices series. For folks who are watching, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe, and also follow Danitsa on LinkedIn and all her social media handles that will accompany this post. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the invite, Sheri.